This is Brian with ScreenFiles.com and Review. And what I'm looking at today is the second season of FX's American Horror Stories. And if you recall from my review of Season 1, I didn't hate it. I actually thought that the stories that didn't revolve around the murder house from the first season of American Horror Stories were actually pretty good for the most part. Nothing groundbreaking by any stretch, but I enjoyed them. That being said, the second season of American Horror Stories lasts only 6 episodes. This is really good because overall, this is one of the worst seasons of an anthology series that I know of. And in fact, I couldn't stand most of the episodes. They just didn't work from a storytelling perspective. Though, let's look at it episode by episode. The first is called Dollhouse. And this so bothered me. For reasons being, I don't think I'm going to get to entirely here. And in fact, I may just make a video just about this particular episode. In any case, it revolves around a woman who is applying for a job at this toy maker, a maker of dolls in particular. And she is eventually trapped in a dollhouse, essentially. And he's doing this because he's looking for the perfect wife to take care of his son. The story itself isn't terrible, but the best way to describe the most pertinent problem with Dollhouse is that if you've heard of the concept of Chekhov's gun, which is to say, in movies, if you're going to introduce something, let's say a gun, that gun at some point has to be used, essentially. You don't introduce it and have it play no role whatsoever in what follows. And the issue is that they introduced a wrinkle to the story about, I want to say, a third of the way in, that makes no sense, in that you could have just as easily have laid the groundwork for that wrinkle earlier in the episode, i.e. the reference to Chekhov's gun. So therefore, it would make sense. It's a sloppy episode, weirdly sloppy, because it didn't need to be. And don't get me started on the politics of this episode. Really problematic. And they were another reason I didn't particularly enjoy this episode. And that's not to say tackling the politics of the day is a problem in and of itself. If it's done well, you can tackle whatever you want. Unfortunately, what happens in the Dollhouse episode of American Horror Story are politics done very, very badly. Not a fan, and a very bad way to start anything, never mind an anthology series. The second episode of American Horror Story is called Aura, and this was actually a pretty decent episode. It revolves around these smart doorbells, and supposedly this particular doorbell, called an Aura, has the ability to bring back the dead? It's really odd, and it's interesting, and it's pretty well done. The problem is that they try to explain what it does by bringing up some explanation about string theory and quantum entanglement or something of that nature. It's a doorbell, and trust me, if a doorbell has any at all connection to string theory, they're not going to sell it. Just the idea that they tried to make this make sense in that fashion bothered me. Do you know why? Because all they had to do was just go with the doorbell that reveals the dead. It's a little more complex than that. It's essentially what it does, but it's a little more involved. Though, that's all they needed to do. I don't want to hear any nonsense about string theory. It's a fucking doorbell where you can see the dead. Done. In no way does it make sense. And that's okay. It doesn't have to make sense. The error is in trying to explain it into being with nonsense. It could just be a regular video doorbell. That's it. You don't have to explain how it does what it does, because we are talking about nonsense. This is make-believe. This is silliness. So roll with it. Don't try to find a scientific basis for it, particularly not in an episode that lasts only 44 minutes. If you have an entire movie to do it, I maybe can see it, because that way you can flesh it out. Don't do it in a short form video. The third episode of the second season of American Horror Story is called Drive. And it's not bad. It revolves around this couple. And the lady in the relationship is seeking space from her husband. And the relationship is crumbling. And there comes a point where she's at a nightclub and she appears to be accosted by a killer in her car. It's not bad, it's pretty well done, and it's one of the better episodes of the second season, which is not saying much, frankly. The third episode is called Milkmaids, and man, this episode irritated me so much. It takes place, I want to say, in the 1500s or some such time period, and revolves around this prostitute who believes that her boils offer a cure for smallpox, which is raging in the country at the time. This is a ridiculous episode. Why is it ridiculous, you might ask? Because, at least to me, it doesn't feel like it knows what it wants to be. At one point, it literally begins to explain how smallpox spreads in detail, spending way too much time on it. And the problem with that is that the scenario that the story is working with is kind of ridiculous. And if that were the only problem, I might be better able to deal with it. But they keep saying the word milkmaid way too much. It's almost used as an exclamation of disgust at points. And it's really weird. And it's just an irritating episode overall. It's not terrible, it's certainly watchable, but why would you want to? This is so not great. So far I've talked about 4 episodes of the second season, and 2 of the 4 aren't that great. Not a great record. The 5th episode is called Bloody Mary, which is a play upon the urban legend of Bloody Mary. You know, look in a mirror, say Bloody Mary a few times, whatever is supposed to happen. In any case, it revolves around a group of black young people. And there's a certain vitality that comes with this change that's really interesting to watch. Unfortunately, it's not a great episode. And in fact, if it wasn't for the vitality, the energy that these 4 or 5 actresses bring to the roles that they're playing, this episode would also not be particularly good. It's not terrible, it's just kind of there. So out of the 5 episodes, only 2, by my reckoning, are really worth thinking about at all. And finally, the 6th episode is called Facelift. And this is one of those episodes that zigs when it should have zagged. It revolves around this older woman who does not take aging gracefully at all. In fact, she's going kicking and fighting. She does all sorts of odd things to seemingly restore her youthful appearance. And she stumbles upon this I was about to say plastic surgeon, but I honestly don't know what the woman was. They never really specified. Though this woman is supposed to be able to help this other woman restore her looks. I didn't think the woman, frankly, looked bad at all. She just looked like what she is, which is to say an older woman. And in any case, she starts to go to this woman for treatments. And what happens is interesting, though it's kind of stupid, to be totally honest. And the reason that I think it's stupid is that the story doesn't give you enough basis for how it happens. To compare it with Milkmaids, the 5th episode, they gave you too much information about smallpox. In the case of Facelift, you're given too little information about how this is actually possible. By which I mean, I'm referring to how this woman can look after whatever this doctor or whatever she was did whatever to her. It's an interesting concept, but in the fleshing out, it fails, unfortunately. It's not, once again, it's watchable, but it's so not good. I don't know why you'd want to. Though, I guess the greatest problem of all with the second season of American Horror Stories is that Manny Coto wrote or co-wrote most of the episodes. If you're not familiar with Manny Coto, he's done work on the latter seasons of Star Trek Enterprise. He did Odyssey 5, that was on Showtime, as well as numerous other projects. I think he did a movie called Star Kid, which I haven't seen. Though, I liked his work when I've seen it, typically. Though this is some of the worst stuff I've ever seen from a man. If you're a person that likes to complete things, you might want to look at the second season. As I said, it's on the whole not very good, but you might find a little more that engages you about it. So what do you think? This is Brian with ScreenFiles.com and Review. If you agree, disagree, let me know down below. And as usual, consider a like or a follow. Peace. And by the way, IMDb lists 8 episodes for this season. As far as I'm aware, there are only 6. American Horror Stories is on Hulu. I haven't seen it on FX because I don't have FX. Though on Hulu, there are not 8 episodes, there are only 6. It's such a good thing because to get 2 decent episodes out of 6 is just not very good odds.